So, Jerry, what was your break before you even got into Peter Gabriel's band?
Before Peter Gabriel? What did I?
What was your break? What was your break?
Well, you mean my very first my first break into becoming a professional musician? Oh God, my older brother, who's a drummer as well, very successful. He's about 8 years older than me, so he had done a record. We lived in New York and in the New York area, and he was doing sessions on lots of records. And he had done a record with a group in 1973, like Crosby, Stills and Nash, which was that was the sound. Acoustic guitar, piano, violin, and vocals. And they were going on tour. They asked him. He didn't want to do it, so he recommended me to go and play with them, which I did, and they had a record on Columbia, and they were doing quite well, and so that's where it really all began, and then I think I was about 16, maybe 17, and then when I was around 18 or 18, somewhere in the 18 years, I auditioned to be in a band called Orleans, which was, first of all, they were one of my favorite bands on the planet already. Okay. And they had a big hit, a song called Dance With Me. And then, and I'd seen them play numerous times live. They were a great band. And I was like, so lucky I got an opportunity again through my brother, because he knew the leader of that band. And so I went and auditioned to play with them, and against many drummers, and I got the job. So I was very lucky at a young age. That was about 18, somewhere around there. I think I was about 20 or 21 when I got an opportunity. The lead singer of Orleans quit, and I was destroyed. I was like devastated. So, but within a month, somehow it came up that an English singer was looking for a drummer. He needed a drummer. It was a singer named Peter Gabriel. I didn't know who he was, and I didn't know who Genesis. I mean, I think I had heard of Genesis, but I certainly wasn't a prog fan of any kind. So, but I listened to that first record, with Moribund the Burgermeister and Waiting for the Big One. No, the Salisbury Hill. It wasn't anything like my kind of music at all. I mean, I grew up listening to Motown black music. That was my thing, was soul, R&B soul. So there was no R&B in that record. Like, there was soulfulness, but not the kind of soulfulness. It wasn't black soul.
And it was British.
And right, British, but you know what I mean? It was very different influence. And what wasn't funky. But my band had broken up. I didn't have a job, and this was an opportunity to go to start in England, where I had never been to Europe, and it was a job. It paid pretty well, and I thought it would be a challenge just to give it a try, and so that's when I started playing with Peter in 1977, and that lasted, I don't know, 8 or 10 years, something like 10 years on and off.
So you got invited by Peter Gabriel? I mean, he was famous at that time already.
I don't know how famous he was. I mean, he was certainly well known because of Genesis, but it was a strange situation. I got this cassette tape. That's how long ago it was, that first record, and I listened to it. I don't know how it came about that it had been handed to me. But there was no competition that I know of. Maybe he does, but it wasn't like, he wanted to audition me. I think he maybe listened to an Orleans record. And he listened to an Orleans record. But ironically, it's quite possible that the record that he listened to, I wasn't the drummer on it. It was when I joined Orleans, they had another drummer, and he remained in the band, but he wanted to play other instruments, guitar and keyboard. So I never sat down and really figured it out. It didn't really matter. Anyway, I just got the job. I mean, they hired me, and and it was fly to England and rehearse, and it was just an interesting thing was a challenge. It wasn't the kind of music I wasn't drawn to it per se, but it was unusual. And I mean, I oftentimes, Moribund the Burgermeister is obviously, well, maybe not so obvious, but obviously to me, that's very strange. First of all, moribund. I understood the word "the," but moribund and Burgermeister. I mean, what are
is a
those?
Burgermeister?
What words are those? So, and then the "I will find out." Like, what music was this? There was no Motown band ever. No singer sang like that. No, So, but I was just. This was so out there. I thought. I gotta try this. I mean, it's a challenge.
Okay. How did the band work? How did they work out the songs? Were they jams first and developed into songs? Or
Which band?
Peter Gabriel's band.
Peter Gabriel. Well, we did tour. We toured first. It was Tony Levin, bass player. Sid McGuinness was the guitar player who, was an American guitar player, and Larry Fast played keyboards, and me, and Peter. And I don't know, there was a tour where we had a percussionist, but I don't remember if it was the first tour. Different people kind of came and went, but the core group was Tony, Larry Fast, and I. And then guitar players swapped. Sid did a record and tour or two, and then John Ellis, and then eventually David Rhodes. He was the guitar. We did some work with him, and then he still plays with Peter. I mean, he's been Peter's good friend. And
what I mean is, did you develop the songs together, or the arrangement at least together, or was that all Peter?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I don't really ever remember. For the most part, I don't remember Peter coming in with a finished song. I mean, really far from it. I mean, ultimately, in the end, they were his songs, but we did a lot of jamming on ideas of like some idea thing. He's playing a couple chords on the piano, and we would start to jam on that, and then it would develop into whatever. But yeah, we did do that a lot. A lot of that. He had rented a house called Ashcombe House, which was in Bath, where he lived, and so we that was kind of our base of operations when we were in England and working with him. He was married and had small children, so he wanted to be as close to home as possible, and so he set up in a barn, like a barn on the property. We set up, and that's where we would rehearse. And eventually we did actually record there as well. And so we just kind of, he'd come in with some idea, and we'd play around with it, and he'd change it and, develop it. It was really a good process.
Okay, and that went on, including the famous album "So," right? That's when you split after that.
I
right?
worked with him up until "So." And the at the time where what happened with the album "So" was there was a time span to record with Peter, and then there was another time period just after that when I was doing a record with Paul McCartney, and sort of at the last minute Peter changed his schedule, and he changed it to where it was exactly when I was supposed to work with Paul McCartney, and it was a little bit of a conundrum for me. But I mean, I had made a commitment to Paul, and the Paul McCartney record was Paul, a guy named Eric Stewart who had a band called 10cc, if you remember them, and Eric and Paul were writing together, and me. It was just three of us. That's how the record began.
Wow.
And
what's the name of that record?
It's called Press to Play.
Press to Play.
Yeah. It's not one of his, his career, but, at that point, it wasn't really fashionable to be Paul McCartney. That's my sense of it. I think this was, Lennon had been killed, and there were a lot of people that felt like there was a thing about Lennon being the real creative force in the Beatles. And then that along with Paul he did a record. He did a song with Michael Jackson, no, Stevie Wonder, called Ebony and Ivory, and then Silly Love Song. And that he can write like that. I mean, he can write great songs, but
Very
he can also
of
write
course.
Ebony and Ivory and Silly Love Song. I mean, he just writes them. I don't think he's trying to be hip, cool, or whatever. And I think at that time also, it was starting grunge, punk, musical, tastes changed, and it wasn't really fashionable to be Paul McCartney at that particular time. So anyway, that I can't speak for Peter, but I think he wasn't happy about the fact that I couldn't do Peter's. I couldn't work with Peter like he wanted me to. I would go from Paul's studio in Sussex in England to Bath to Peter's studio, maybe on the weekend when I could. I would go and we would record, but I couldn't be there the whole time.
Well, as we all know, you don't keep a chair like that forever in any touring band or with any great artists. Sometimes
no, it's not totally true. I mean, David Rhodes has been with Peter forever. Tony Levin started playing. He worked on the very first record in '75. So, what is that coming up on? 50 years? 70. I mean, really? Tony's been playing with Peter. Okay. I mean, there was a year where, and there was a time where John Giblin, the bass player, because Tony was on tour, was working with Paul Simon. Mm-hmm. They made a record and they made a movie.
They made a movie.
They made a movie called One Trick Pony. Paul Simon wrote a movie about a singer, and it was he's the singer, but not Paul Simon, but he used his band. Tony was in it. They were shooting a movie, making a record, shooting it. So there was a period of time. I think it might have been the third. It was the third record. I believe it was the third solo record, the Melting Face record, and then. The record we did, a lot of that was done with John Giblin, who's a bass player that ultimately ended up in Simple Minds for quite a long time, and who he met because they opened for Peter before anybody knew who they were. And John, and we toured with Simple Minds, and that's how John. But he played on a bunch of stuff, and but other than that, I think for the most part, Tony has been. But yeah, I mean. I'm whatever. I was happy to be working with Peter in that period of time that I did, and since then I worked with a lot of artists, a lot of other people.
How did you get to into the Hall & Oates band? How did that happen?
I had auditioned to play with Hall & Oates a few years before, and I didn't get the job, and. For whatever reason. But then, through the relationship with Robert Fripp, working with Robert on a record, he produced the second Peter Gabriel solo record. And Robert Fripp did, King Crimson, in case you don't know who Robert is. But then, and then Hall was working on a solo record with Robert. And then, Daryl, became very infatuated with the whole sound, English sound, and Gabriel and whatnot. So we played a show with Peter at a club in New York called The Bottom Line. Like it was one of those like unannounced, shows because the place wasn't really big. It wasn't that big, but and Daryl came to that show, and then the next day I got a call from his manager. That he was like, well, Daryl really wants you to come in, and they're going to start doing a record. When, excuse me, what's your schedule like? They really want you. Daryl just really wants you to do it. He wants you to play on the record and whatnot. And so we worked out the scheduling, and that was great working with Hall & Oates. Much more my kind of music, that rock and soul, because they have that Philly. Sure. Rock soul thing. And so for the next couple of years, it was like a dream come true because I was working with Peter and Daryl and John. and
really?
they were scheduling things around my schedule.
So that was in parallel at that time. That
Yeah.
worked in parallel.
I was working with both of those artists
Great.
at the same time, and like I finished a tour with Hall and Oates in Tokyo, and I think it was even on my birthday in February, and everybody else went home, and I flew to England, and I got to Ashcombe House, where the rehearsal house, very early in the morning, and I waited for everybody to get up, the band and everything, and started to rehearse for a tour with Peter. It was. Believe me, it's not like that anymore. It's not like that anymore. It's not like that anymore. But
changed quite a bit.
There was a period of time where people were really some people really wanted to work with me, and I started working on a lot of. After that, I just started working on a lot of different records.
How many Hall & Oates albums did you play?
I think like 3.
3?
Yeah.
Okay. You played on Tears for Fears. Sorry. You played on Tears for Fears as well?
Well, I did a tour with Tears for Fears.
Oh, you did a tour with them.
And then they went into the studio to record their next record after The Hurting. And that album ended up being Songs from the Big Chair. And I did some sessions for them for that record. There's a song called The Working Hour, I think, which is one that I'm on, and there was another song called Head Over Heels, which may or may not be me, or some of it might be me. Some of the drumming might be me. At that point it got to, who knows who, it like what Peter's thing was, Stuart Copeland's playing hi-hat, Jerry's playing bass drum and tom-toms. We're using, from our sessions, that Peter got into using bits and pieces of different people and putting them together, which creates an interesting, atmosphere, unlike a normal drummer.
So Jerry, back in Munich, I saw an amazing trio with you on drums, with Michele Vituli, stick player on bass and stick, and with a very authentic singer-songwriter, very outstanding. His name is Flav Martin.
Yeah,
and you played some great songs from an album that's called Soul Redemption. Let's talk about that a little.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We don't have a copy of it here, but it's okay.
I have it up there.
It's fine. It's fine.
I'll show it later.
But yeah, did a record with Flav called Soul Redemption, and then we toured in Europe a bit, and we ended up in Munich thanks to Alex, and we're a part of that performance. Did a show together. Yeah, great. Michele is a stick player, bass player. He was based in Italy. Now he lives in Spain, which is where his wife is from.
He's a very nice guy, a bit of a nerd maybe.
Great guy, great, super talented.
Yeah, I'm in contact with him via Facebook.
Oh, you are good.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's awesome. Great, really a very soulful writer and guitar player, very good guitar player. And yeah, we had a lot of fun. I produced that record with working with Flav, and it turned out, I'm really pleased with the way it turned out, and was very happy that you chose 2 songs off of that record for us to perform together here at Dreamland for your podcast. I think that's a good call, and you both played the songs really beautifully, performed them beautifully.
So there's the title track, Soul Redemption, and I said earlier it's a perfect track for driving.
Yeah.
You agree, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
I like the whole record for driving, but I don't know if you've ever been able to listen to the whole record from start to finish. But I like every song on the record, and there's a great, there's the coffee song which he sings in Italian because he's Italian and he can speak Italian and sings in Italian. So, but it's a nice common mixture of moods on the record, and Flav's really super talented guy.
I think his melodies as well as his chords go meandering. You know, like they wind their way up to a chorus, and all of a sudden it's there.
Yeah. That's Flav.
Yeah,
That's the way he is as a guy, as a person. He likes to meander.
There's early morning now, but there's pretzels in my hair. The refrigerator's open, but it's looking pretty bare. I'm riding for the milk, cause you know I'm taking chances. Listen to this dairy, got my belly dancing rancid. What's the truth, my dear? Maybe we can seek it out. As for now, my baby, I got a plan no one can doubt. How about we go dancing? How about we fly right out of here? How about we go smashing? Smash reality in the mouth, down for the count. Shot a ball in the restaurant, that is if time will allow. Well, what the heck is a girl supposed to do? Well, what the heck is a girl supposed to do? What the heck is a girl supposed to do when thinking about tomorrow? And listen out till day. Maybe we can go out, seeking soul redemption. We're gonna have a seat and some coffee if I'm able. But a stupid stack of bills is spread it on the table. So I file it alphabetically, neatly in a pile. You never know when you and me killing for a fire. What's the truth, my dear? Maybe we can seek it out. As for now, my baby, I got a plan no one can doubt. How about we go dancing? How about we fly right out of here? How about we go smashing? Smash reality in the mouth, down for the count. Shot a ball in the restaurant, that is if time will allow. Well, what the heck is a girl supposed to do? What the heck is a girl supposed to do? What the heck is a girl supposed to do when thinking about tomorrow? And listen out today. Maybe we can go seeking soul redemption.
So it was really, really fun to do these 2 songs with you. So,
Yeah, awesome.
and such a big honor that you do this.
Well, it was an honor for me as well. And I thank you guys for inviting me to be a part of your podcast.
Thanks for having us here. I mean,
Yeah, no. I'm going to be sad when you know that who knows when we'll get a chance to play music together. I don't know.
let's see. You know, you meet everybody twice, at least twice. You know,
Yeah.
in life.
Anyway, yeah, I you know, it's been really fun, really great, and hopefully we have what 3 or 4 more days of music to do together and hanging out. So it's going to be a lot of fun. That's going to make me even sadder when you all leave, because I'll miss all of you. I want to say one last thing, just because I think not talking about what we're going to do the rest of the week with, you know, working with a young band called Fragile Elephant. I think it's very interesting the combination of there's an old timer like me, you know, old timer, you know, and then working with you guys, and you certainly have like a lot of experience and have been doing what you're doing. And then of course Alex, who's also been doing what he does, making records, having his band and performing for many years. And then the addition of these 3 kids, you know, I just say kids, you know, but they're young, and they're, you know, they haven't had the same experiences yet that we have, and I think that's also part of what the magic of what's going on here is to have us all together, and there's times, you know, when we're all interacting together and playing music where it doesn't matter who's older, who's younger. It's like we're basically all on the same level, because we're all doing the same thing. I just wanted to acknowledge that's really an important thing for me, and it really motivates me. You know, it motivates me because that's a very different experience being around. I love being around inexperienced people who are, you know, young and they're not jaded about the business and life, and they're just excited about making music, and they're like, you know, this is like a big candy store to those guys. When they came in here, they're just so excited.
Jetzt ist es gleich soweit. Wir müssen langsam wieder fahren. Schade. Ich will noch da bleiben.
Sehr schade, ja.
Ich will noch da
Hier
bleiben.
könnte man ohne weiteres noch einige Zeit verbringen und noch viel mehr Songs aufnehmen.
Leute, wir hatten eine unglaubliche Zeit hier im Dreamland Studio bei Jerry Marotta. Es war Wahnsinn. Also wir freuen uns so, euch diese Sachen zu zeigen, die wir da gemacht haben. Und ja, also das waren, ja, weiß nicht.
Es war eine tolle Woche und sehr inspirierend.
Ja, absolut. Ich habe schon lange nichts mehr so Schönes erlebt.
So, und jetzt ist es an der Zeit, den Mann ins Bild zu holen, der uns überhaupt hierher gebracht hat, von dem die Idee gestammt hat. Das ist Alex Sebastian aus München. Alex,
hi.
Mal dazu. Hi, Alex. Alex ist der Mastermind von München, Munich Song Slam.
Munich Song Connection
Munich
Slam.
Song Connection
Genau.
Song Slam.
So, genau, richtig.
Das ist ein Bandwettbewerb.
Ja, und da haben wir letztes Jahr eine Special Competition gemacht, wo eine junge Münchner Band eben diese Reise hierher gewonnen hat.
Genau, die Fragile Elephants, von denen wird man auf jeden Fall noch hören. Die haben gestern schon so gezockt im Studio und nehmen heute noch einen weiteren Song auf. Und das ist also wirklich, die sind richtig gut.
Ja, genau. Ja, und super, und vielen Dank, dass ihr mitgekommen seid, ja, weil ich brauchte jemanden, der ein bisschen Klavier spielen kann für meine Songs.
Genau den richtigen gefunden. Genau,
Danke euch.
Da sind wir auch gleich dabei. Es gibt einen Livestream, es gibt genauer gesagt 2 Livestreams mit Alex Sebastian und seinen Songs. Und die findet ihr auf Alex Sebastian MUC und auf dem Kanal von Jerry Marotta. Schaut es euch gerne mal an. Ihr werdet sehen, tolle Songs. Alex hat schon, ich glaube, drei Alben gemacht.
Ja, 2,5. würde ich sagen.
2,5. Genau. Schaut rein und vielleicht habt ihr da was Neues für euch entdeckt. Danke sehr und danke fürs Zuhören. Macht's gut. Ciao. Bis
Ciao.
bald. Ciao.